Hello, and thank you for joining me for the continued reading of Anyone Got a Match by Max Schulman. And I hope someone out there is enjoying this because I'm going for it all the way through, and I love doing this. No comments about it, which is probably okay. I want people to kind of listen if you're listening and soak it in before any comments get going. For anyone who is wondering why I'm reading this book full of cringy phrasing and terrifying demonstration of, how people wrote novels back then, stick with me and pay attention. Everything you're cringing at was cringy then, and Schulman knew it and is not being merely, this is how I think, and take it. No, this is an indictment of a lot of things. And I strongly recommend embracing it as we go. So, onward, chapter 6 and 7. Chapter 6. Making a first-rate college out of Acanthus was a task roughly comparable with turning Tijuana into the Acropolis, or the Three Stooges into Learned Hand. Yet Jefferson Tatum and Virgil Tatum accomplished the metamorphosis in the incredibly short period of 6 months. They embarked on the project in March. They were finished in time for the fall semester. They divided the work of transforming Acanthus into two parts. Jefferson rang out the old, Virgil brought in the new. Jefferson's chore was, in the main, easier. To get rid of the incumbent student body, a simple literacy test was sufficient. To shuck the resident faculty, all elders of the Don't Fiddle with the Gospel Brotherhood, Jefferson offered these alternatives. Either they could sail on a 3-year mission to the Jivaros, or else they could retire on full pensions. All chose the pensions, save for one, who declined both offers and went into the aluminum siding game. One task remained: firing 19 Myers, and Jefferson approached the moment with trepidation. He was convinced that 19 as a free agent would be instantly grabbed by Wake Forest or Duke, and the thought of his coach carrying the colors of R.J. Reynolds or American Tobacco filled the old man with profound melancholy. But Jefferson was wrong. 19 sighed mightily when he was dismissed and wiped his eyes and blew his nose on his sleeve. And then he said, "Well, Mr. Tatum, I guess that's the end of me as a coach." "Nonsense, 19," Jefferson protested. "Plenty of places be glad to have you." "No, it wouldn't be the same," said 19, shaking his head sadly. "Way the college business is going these days, wherever I went, I'd be Heinz tit to a bunch of deans. What's the use kidding? I'd never find a touch like I had here. Acanthus, God bless it, was the last of the football schools." "What will you do then?" "I don't know," said 19, scratching his tree-sized neck. "Politics, maybe. Lots of folks around here like me, don't they?" "Almost nobody," said Jefferson gently. "It's best that you know." "Oh," said 19. He lapsed into silence, furrowing his minuscule forehead with concentration. "Listen," said Jefferson, "you must have gone to school at one time. You didn't by chance learn some kind of a trade." "By God, I did," cried 19, his face lighting up like a sunburst. "Clean forgot about it. I've got a diploma in dentistry." "Why, that's real nice, 19. I'll set up an office for you right away." "Gee, I better not," said 19 doubtfully. "I ain't what you'd call real good at it." "Who'll know?" asked Jefferson. "Yeah, that's right," said 19 upon reflection, and within weeks he was conducting a decently lucrative practice. While Jefferson was cleaning the dead wood from Acanthus, Virgil packed his bags and crisscrossed the nation, seeking the eminent professors of nutrition and food chemistry who were needed to prove that anything you eat will kill you, plus distinguished teachers in the arts, the humanities, and the social and natural sciences who were needed to make Acanthus a top-caliber college. Virgil's excursions failed more often than they succeeded, but he persevered, and by midsummer he managed to bag 135 teachers, every one of them with impeccable credentials. It was a faculty that would have done honor to Harvard, Yale, MIT, or Stanford, which is in fact where Virgil stole most of them. Stealing was not Virgil's line of work, but as he kept telling his rumbling conscience, how else could he get a good teacher to come to Acanthus? Someday, he assured himself, eminent academicians would beg for appointments to Acanthus, would trample each other. But for now, conscience be still, robbery was the only answer. So he snuck from campus to campus with a three-pronged burglar's tool. First, of course, money, salaries not even dreamed of in the collegiate world. Second, contracts ensuring lifetime tenure. Third, and most alluring to his quarry, binding ironclad loophole-proof guarantees of academic freedom. Having snared a faculty of 135 luminaries, Virgil then proceeded to gather a student body worthy of sitting at such illustrious feet. Toward this end, he scattered full scholarships like autumn leaves, and in short order he enrolled 1,200 undergraduates with straight-A averages and glasses. On the evening of the second Wednesday in September, just one day before the fall semester officially began, the new members of the Acanthus faculty were invited to the common room for an informal get-together co-hosted by the president of the college, Virgil Tatum, and the chairman of the board of trustees, Jefferson Tatum. The common room was beamed and paneled in oak. At each end was a massive refectory table on which long-stemmed glasses and crystal decanters of sherry were arrayed. A generous scattering of leather couches and chairs provided seating. The end tables were numerous, sturdy, and stacked with learned journals. 135 teachers were present in the common room, eddying sluggishly as people do in the opening minutes of a party. Against the wall stood the co-hosts, Virgil and Jefferson, together surveying the assemblage. Virgil's face was filled with pride, Jefferson's with open apprehension. "What's the matter, Pa?" asked Virgil. "Nervous?" "Me? What for?" "Well, meeting all these strange people for the first time." "There now, boy, you have spoken the truth," said Jefferson. "Strange is just what them people are. Never saw the like. Where did you find such a mess of loony birds?" "It wasn't easy," said Virgil. "Couldn't have been." "Hush," said Virgil. "Here comes the first." Approaching was a tweedy apparition named Professor Joel Kane, a milky-pale, unshorn man who, though not yet 30 years old, knew more about Wordsworth's sister Dorothy than Wordsworth had known himself. "Evening, Prexy," said Kane. "Evening, Kane," said Virgil. "I'd like you to meet my father." "How do," said Jefferson, and grasped the professor's hands. 2 tears popped into Kane's eyes and rolled slowly down his cheeks. "How do you do?" he whimpered. "Help yourself to sherry, Kane," said Virgil. Kane bit his lip, nodded gratefully, and scurried away. "What the hell?" said Jefferson, dumbfounded. "Pa," said Virgil, "this is not an Elks convention. Watch those manly handshakes." "Maybe I ought to curtsy," said Jefferson. "Evening, Prexy," said a newcomer, a round, pink, elderly, bald, twinkly man with suede patches on his elbows. "Evening," said Virgil. "Pa, I'd like you to meet Professor Lyndon Evarts." Jefferson took the professor's hand, gave it a delicate press, returned it carefully, and said, "How do, Mr. Evarts?" "That's Lyndon Evarts," said Lyndon Evarts, "with a hyphen." "Fine," said Jefferson. "You might say," continued Lyndon Evarts with a merry chuckle, "that almost everything about me is hyphenated. Some call me a sociologist historian. Others say that I am an anthropologist economist. Still others contend that I am a psychologist archaeologist. And no doubt you have heard Irving Howe's epigram describing me as a medievalist modernist. Rather a better phrase-maker than a critic, don't you think?" "Who?" said Jefferson. "How?" said Lyndon Evarts. "Oh," said Jefferson. "Robert Penn Warren called me a philosopher-photographer," said Lyndon Evarts. "In his cups, of course. Meant no harm. Decent sort, Warren. Quite often too decent. I refer to the Ezra Pound business, naturally." "Virgil," said Jefferson, perspiring lightly, "fetch me a glass of that sherry wine." "Yes, Pa," said Virgil, concealing a smile as he left. "Still," Lyndon Evarts went on, "he was not too wide of the mark." "How?" said Jefferson. "Warren," said Lyndon Evarts. "Oh," said Jefferson, looking rapidly around to see whether he could not find a more likely partner for conversation, specifically one of the food and nutrition experts Virgil had hired. But he could discover no way to distinguish them from their colleagues. He frowned in bewilderment. 135 teachers were gathered in the room, teachers of all sizes, shapes, and sexes, yet to Jefferson's eye there was an indefinable sameness about all of them. Tall or short, thin or fat, bald or hairy, silent or garrulous, aloof or forward, they somehow seemed to be cut all from the same bolt. Wouldn't you think, thought Jefferson, that food chemists would just naturally look different from poetry teachers? Yet they did not. The mark of academe was mysteriously on all of them. Jefferson did not understand it, and what Jefferson did not understand, Jefferson did not like. A vague uneasiness gripped him, a sudden feeling that maybe this whole project had been a mistake. It had all sounded so foolproof when first he and Virgil began, but now as he looked upon this flock of loony birds, he was not sure at all, not the least little bit sure. "But a fig to them all," cried Linden of Arts, breaking into Jefferson's reverie. "Let them call me historian, or anthropologist, or sociologist, or just plain Nosy Parker. I am all of those and more. What I want is to know. So I look, I listen, I poke, I pry, I prod, I burrow. And that, Tatum, is why I am most awfully glad to meet you." "Likewise, I'm sure," said Jefferson politely. "Did you, by chance, read my latest monograph, The Nostalgia for Feudalism?" "Darn," said Jefferson. "Must have missed it somehow." "Pity," said Linden of Arts. "Well, no matter. We'll just start at the beginning. Tatum, why do you think I accepted this post at Acanthus?" "Money," ventured Jefferson. "Perfect, perfect," exclaimed the professor, clapping his hands together. "How precisely in character. Bless you, Tatum. You are a living fossil." "Come to that, you ain't exactly a beauty winner yourself," said Jefferson with a chilly smile. "Sorry, Tatum," said Linden of Arts placatingly. "We'll start again. I recently published, as I said, a monograph called The Nostalgia for Feudalism. Well, of course, the left liberals were up in arms before you could say knife. Oh, what did they not call me? Reactionary, John Bircher, fascist. Me, mind you, who still carries a picture of Adlai Stevenson in his billfold." Said Jefferson, darkly. "But a fig, I say. I shall answer my critics, for I am right. There is among us a most definite nostalgia for feudalism. Yes, here in America, in the second half of the 20th century. Nor is it so difficult to understand. When in all history, I ask you, were things better ordered than during the age of feudalism? There was one unchallenged, preordained leader, and all the rest were followers. Each man gave obeisance and received in return his pallet, his hut, and his pittance. He saw no horizons, and hence did not aspire. Having no ambition, he suffered no frustration. A closed, complete, congruous, consonant world. Not, of course, my own cup of tea, but not nearly so dismal as some would have it." "So how come folks got rid of it?" asked Jefferson. "Ah, but they did not entirely. It still exists, sometimes perfectly intact, and that, Tatum, is why I have come to Acanthus." "I don't get your meaning." "Isn't it obvious? Here is where I will gather material for my next paper, because this town of yours, this Owens Mill, is an almost classic fief, and you, my dear fellow, are an almost flawlessly prototypical lord of the manor." "Now, just a darn minute," said Jefferson, reddening. "This here is a town of free-born people who can live how they like, work where they please, vote for who they want, to come or go, stay or leave, and not one of them beholden to me for nothing." "It's no such thing, you rogue, and you know it," chuckled Linden of Arts, nudging Jefferson playfully in the ribs. "But the question is," he continued, turning serious, "how do you manage it? How, in such an unlikely place? The barons of the 13th and 14th centuries were, after all, imposing serfdom upon basically homogeneous units of populations. But you, Tatum, have successfully made vassals not only of the indigenous stock, but also of a group which is both numerically significant and ethnically quite alien. I refer, of course, to the Negroes of Owens Mill." "What the hell are you talking about?" Jefferson demanded hotly. "For your information, it just so happens that it's practically a dead certain cinch the William Lloyd Garrison Foundation is going to give the Community Relations Reward to Owens Mill this year." "I shouldn't count on it," giggled Linden of Arts merrily. "It also just so happens that I am chairman of the board of trustees of the Garrison Foundation." Then, turning serious again, "But back to my question, Tatum. How do you get your Negroes to accept vassalage with such docility?" Now, see here, rumbled Jefferson, his color deepening. It's all right, said Lyndon of Arts, patting Jefferson's arm. I didn't really expect you to give away your secrets. It's a puzzle I have to solve for myself, and by Jove I shall. I am going to dig, and dig some more until I find the answer. What you are going to do, you little pissant, said Jefferson ominously, is take your picture of Adlai Stevenson and scoot right back where you came from. An urgent tugging at his sleeve turned Jefferson round. Pa, said Virgil, here's your sherry. Don't want it, snapped Jefferson and started to wheel back on Lyndon of Arts. Virgil held, and this Pa, he said, indicating a large, erect, steady-eyed, handsome, gray-haired lady of 50 years who stood at his side, is Dr. Claire Selenko. Jefferson nodded and tried once more to turn away. Virgil's grip tightened. Dr. Selenko is head of our new Department of Nutrition and Public Health, he said pointedly. Jefferson paused, untensed, made a smile. How do, Doctor, he said, offering his hand. She gave it one firm pump. Evening, Tatum, she said. She spoke in level-clipped tones, her eyes meeting Jefferson's dead on. Prexy here tells me you're interested in food adulterants. More than anything in the world, said Jefferson. Shall we set? He took her elbow gallantly and steered her to an empty sofa. Food adulterants, mused Dr. Selenko. Strange thing for a cigarette maker to be concerned about. I mean, you're not exactly peddling health yourself, are you? Never said I was, said Jefferson, looking appraisingly at her handsome, intelligent features. No fool, it was obvious. Some careful footwork would be needed here. Never said I was peddling health, he repeated. All I'm peddling is cigarettes to people who enjoy smoking. Can't do 'em no good, I can think of. On the other hand, can't do 'em no particular harm either. Oh, said Dr. Selenko, are you aware, Tatum, that I was a member of the Surgeon General's panel on smoking? Yes, ma'am, I know that, said Jefferson. Happens you was dead wrong in your report, but that's got nothing to do with the business at hand. You're at Acanthus to study food, not cigarettes. True, she said, and that brings me to my next question. The big money you're paying me, the fine staff you've gathered, the beautiful labs, the marvelous equipment. What's in it for you? That don't rightly concern you, if you'll excuse me, Missy, replied Jefferson courteously. As I understand it, you've been warning people for years that they've been pouring poison down their gullet by the cubic ton. Now I've given you the wherewithal to prove it. While you're proving it, if some benefit should fall my way, I ain't saying they will, mind you, but if they do, why should it matter to you? Fair enough, nodded Dr. Selenko. You can prove it, asked Jefferson sharply. I mean, about all the poisons in our food? With these facilities, this staff, these funds, no doubt whatsoever, she said with perfect positiveness. Good, good, said Jefferson, rubbing his hands gleefully. Mind's telling me how you're going to start out? Glad to. I've divided the staff into 5 teams. One will research permissible doses. And what might that be? The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, allows food processors to dose their products with more than 400 different chemical additives. Things that make bread soft or butter yellow or cornflakes crisp or milk smooth, emulsifiers, preservatives, coloring agents, things like that. Every last one of these 400 chemicals is in itself a deadly poison. Moreover, according to the Public Health Service, also an agency of the federal government, 1/4 of the additives can definitely cause cancer. But FDA maintains that if the additives are used in permissible doses, they are absolutely harmless. Well, well, said Jefferson, eyes shining. And how does FDA arrive at this permissible dose? With the LD50 test, replied Dr. Selenko. L stands for lethal, D stands for dose, and 50 means 50%. Each chemical is added to food in doses of varying strength and tested on different groups of laboratory rats. When the technician finds a dose that will kill only 1/2 of the group of rats being tested, it is then certified by FDA as a permissible dose for humans. But people ain't rats, said Jefferson indignantly. No, nor rabbits, nor hamsters, nor dogs. Each organism has its own system of tolerance for poisons, and even assuming that FDA's permissible dose is safe for 1 human meal, or 2, or 10, or 50, or 100, who knows what the cumulative effect may be over a period of years. Murderers, whispered Jefferson. Good Lord, that FDA ain't nothing but a nest of murderers. Gently, gently, soothed Dr. Selenko. The researchers of FDA are all highly trained scientists, all honorable men who believe implicitly in what they are doing. Of course, it is true that FDA is woefully understaffed, and their budget isn't a tenth of what it ought to be, and they don't attract any of the really bright young college graduates, and their equipment is obsolescent, and they are under constant pressure from the lobbyists of the food industry who swarm all over Washington. But all the same, I would hardly call the FDA murderers. Manslaughterers, said Jefferson, hopefully. Oh no. Will you settle for poor guardians of the public gut? That I'll accept. Fine. Now, about these additives, will you say they get squirted into very many kinds of food? I would say that they get squirted into every kind of food. No kidding, said Jefferson, grinning hugely. Let's take, for example, what you had for lunch today. Can you remember? Ought to remember, he answered. Been having the same thing every day for 50 years. One bourbon old-fashioned, one roast beef sandwich, one tossed salad, one glass of milk. All right, said Dr. Selenko. We'll take a quick look. Your bourbon old-fashioned contained, in addition to the alcohol, an anti-foaming agent called dimethyl polysiloxane, an orange slice sprayed with pesticides and dyed with coal tar, sodium phenylphenate, and ammonia, both preservatives, and a maraschino cherry, preserved with sodium benzoate, bleached with sulfur dioxide, and then reddened with coal tar. The roast beef contained DDT, chlordane, heptachlor, aldrin, and probably several other pesticides that the steer accumulated while he was grazing. It had, besides, one or two female hormones with which the animal had been injected, a residue of aureomycin from the cattle feed, and a film of mineral oil from the wrapping paper. The bread contained a dough conditioner called ammonium chloride, softeners called diglyceride and polyethylene, an antioxidant called ditertiary butyl paracresol, artificial vitamins to replace the nutrients lost in milling, and of course a wide assortment of pesticides. The butter contained nordohydrogen uriatic acid, should have been able to do that one, which is an antioxidant, magnesium oxide, which is a neutralizer, AB and OB yellow, both coal tar dyes, and diacetyl, which inhibits stinking. Do tell, exclaimed Jefferson happily. And in addition, the butter had a heavy concentration of pesticides, and naturally the milk did too. How about the salad? Asked Jefferson hopefully. Crawling with pesticides. Good, good. Also in the salad, there was sodium alginate, which is a stabilizer, monoisopropyl citrate to prevent fat deterioration in the dressing, and shall I go on? No, that's fine. I got the picture. He regarded her with admiration. You know something, you're an awful smart lady. Pretty, too. Not young, of course, but still tolerable good to look at. Thank you. The first team, as I said, will research permissible doses. The second team, what are you doing tomorrow night? Interrupted Jefferson. Dissecting a monkey, said Dr. Selenko. I see, said Jefferson. The second team. The second team will investigate hormones. More and more livestock and poultry are being fattened for market with injections of female hormones, stilbestrol and other estrogens. And in recent years, even fruits and vegetables have been widely dosed with growth hormones derived from plant life, the gibberellins. The effect, of course, is to add bulk and therefore increase the price. Scandalous, said Jefferson, happily. More than you know, said Dr. Selenko. The endocrine balance in the human body is extremely delicate. This indiscriminate use of hormones may have significant, perhaps disastrous consequences. It's not inconceivable, for instance, that we could turn into a nation of oversexed women and impotent men. A bad arrangement, said Jefferson solemnly. Very bad. Very, agreed Dr. Selenko. Look, said Jefferson, tomorrow night you're dissecting a monkey. What are you doing the night after? Grinding his kidneys, said Dr. Selenko. Oh, said Jefferson. Please continue. My third team, said the doctor, will investigate pesticides. Of course, the late Rachel Carson did a brilliant job in this field, and for a time her book had a very real effect. But there has, I fear, been considerable backsliding. The pesticide makers are pretty determined fellows, and the farmers, quite understandably, prefer spraying to weeding. We must preserve Miss Carson's gains. And you're the kid who can do it, said Jefferson, patting her knee. Next. Team number 4 will look into food packaging. What's the matter with food packaging? He asked, curiously. We're not sure, but we have well-formed suspicions. I'm talking of the new plastic packages, polyethylene, squeeze bottles, and all the other substances made of long synthetic molecules which do not occur in nature. How stable are those molecules? What happens when a plastic package has been on a grocer's shelf for 6 months or a year? Do the molecules in the package begin to unravel? And if so, do they enter the foodstuff? And if so, how do they affect the human who eats the foodstuff? Not favorably, is my guess. You're scaring me half to death, said Jefferson, his face a study in delight. Oh, sweet Lord, what a pile of ammunition this pretty lady doctor was going to give him. Great balls of fire, what a barrage he was going to turn loose on the country. He would get people so shaky that every tobacco counter in America would be positively mobbed. He might, in fact, bring back cigarette rationing. And your fifth team, he asked, beaming on the pretty lady doctor. The fifth team will study drinking water, which, to be perfectly honest, is my field. Dr. Levine is in charge of the product. He's the short man with the large red beard over there. Would you like to talk to him? Directly, Missy, directly. First, let me ask you something. When you prove all these things we've been talking about, how do you go about telling folks? We publish our findings in the Quarterly of the American Nutritional Society, she answered. Oh, swell, said Jefferson silently. Aloud and with his most fetching smile, he said, Missy, I got some powerful good news for you. When you finish your experiments, I am going to put the results on the television, coast to coast. Television, exclaimed Dr. Solenko, taken aback. Good heavens. Why not? Well, I don't know, she said hesitantly. Isn't it a bit gaudy? Yes, it is, said Jefferson, putting on his most earnest expression. I'll admit it, and I know it's strange to you and all the good people you're working with. I mean, you're nice, quiet, studious ladies and gentlemen, and you don't cotton to hoopla and stuff like that. But remember, Missy, what you're doing here is trying to warn the United States of America that it's getting poisoned to death. Now, can you think of a better way to spread the alarm than the television? I suppose when you put it that way, said Dr. Solenko. Jefferson rose and shook her hand. I want to thank you for your time and patience, Doctor, and I'd certainly admire to call on you some evening when you finish with the monkey. He bowed, turned, and started toward Dr. Levine, the short man with the large red beard, but Virgil intercepted him in mid-passage. You're looking mighty pleased, Pa. I am, boy, I am. Had a fine talk with Dr. Solenko. First-class scientist, said Virgil. First class, agreed Jefferson. Got a pretty fair set of knockers, too. She's spoken for. Well, I've heard some talk about her and Linden of Arts. That settles it, said Jefferson decisively. Boy, you pay off that hyphenated loony bird and pack him in. No, Pa, said Virgil. Boy, this is your daddy talking. Daddy, this is the president of Acanthus talking. To get these people here, I promised them tenure. What's that? That means an unbreakable lifetime contract. They cannot be fired. You're one hell of a sharp trader, said Jefferson, shaking his head. Praise God you stayed out of the cigarette company. Amen, said Virgil. Okay, you made a promise and we got to stick with it. We can't fire that loony bird, but we sure as death can keep him from nosing around in my business. No, Pa, I promised them academic freedom, too. They can speak, teach, research, write, and publish anything they please. Jefferson smiled uneasily. You mean within reason, of course, don't you, boy? You surely didn't give them license to teach, like, communism, for instance, or atheism. I surely did. Also, if they are so minded, free love, racial equality, and safecracking. A little joke here, boy, said Jefferson, his smile increasing in size and nervousness. He looked into Virgil's eyes for confirmation. He found none. His smile faded. My son, he said hollowly, what is happening here? What is happening here, Virgil answered, is what you call a university. No, a bird sanctuary, said Jefferson. That's what is happening here. A bird sanctuary for loony birds. Virgil grinned. Maybe so, Pa, he said, but useful loony birds. He reached out and stopped a short man with a large red beard who was heading toward the sherry. Levine, he said, I don't believe you've met my father. The gloom scudded from Jefferson's face. How do, he said winsomely, clasping the doctor's hand. I understand you're our expert in water. Water? Faugh! Sneered Levine. That stuff will kill you. Is that a fact now? Said Jefferson, taking the doctor tenderly by the arm. Come, let's set, and you tell me all about it. Chapter 6, enough for this time. Take care.